Good afternoon, everyone, and I would like to thank you for taking the time to join us or to join Testhouse today for our live webcast. In joint collaboration and partnership with both Microsoft and Comparex, today's session will be on automated testing using Visual Studio 2013 CodedUI. We will present an overview of CodedUI within Visual Studio 2013, such as creating simple tests and explore data-driven testing. I am proud today to be joined by my colleague today, Peter Manwaring, our Visual Studio consultant for Testhouse. The presentation will last for roughly 40 minutes, plus Q&A at the end of the session. Before I pass you over to my colleague, Peter, please feel free to type in your individual questions on your Q&A pod now or during the presentation. We will be answering most of the questions if time permits. A full screen at the top of your screen is also available, which will be very useful when Peter will run his demos. So without further delay, I now pass you over to my colleague, Peter.
Well, thank you, Mel, and welcome everyone to the webcast for CodedUI. My name is Peter Manwaring. I've been a Visual Studio consultant here at Testhouse for about 3 years now, and I've worked on various projects to do with all sorts of testing, CodedUI and manual testing. So let's run through what we're going to talk about today. We'll have a quick overview of the company. Then we'll look at an overview of Visual Studio just to get an idea of what it's capable of. Then we'll create a basic CodedUI test. We'll use some action recordings as well, and we'll finish off with a Q&A session. So something about the company. We're founded in 2000, so we've been going for about 15 years or so. Headquartered in London, Docklands. We have full service centres in the UK and the Middle East and India, so we can service customers very well in those regions. We have good partnerships with major software vendors. We're gold partners with Microsoft and also have good relationships with HP and IBM. And we are a quality partner for many leading organisations to make sure that their software quality is as good as they hope it can be. We're also very good with our people and make sure they're up to date with the latest technologies. We see ourselves as one of the global leaders in specialist software QA consultancy, and we also hope to be able to set some trends and going forwards within this space. And we're very flexible in the service that we give and let our customers take the lead. You can see here some of our major clients. We have managed services for some very prestigious clients in different spaces like media, selling, websites, and banks and other financial institutions. We also do performance testing for websites, etc. Automation and frameworks, which is one step beyond simple automation to make it easy for them to develop their own solutions around that area, and also to give guidance and consultancy on all areas of QA. So we're partnered with Microsoft, and we also have good knowledge in open source and other major software vendors. And we have quite a plethora of different software that we have expertise in. We have quite a few consultants and associates who we can call on their expertise, and together we can cover just about anything. But we're going to have a quick view of Visual Studio from above, as it were, so you can get a good view of how Visual Studio can help. So first of all, we're going to look at some additions. First of all, there's an Express edition. It's free, so you can see there are several versions of Express. Okay, they're there to help you develop for websites, develop for Windows applications, and also desktop. Also, you can develop on the cloud as well. But there's something quite new in this space called Community. This is another free version of Visual Studio, which is specifically designed for small groups and individuals to allow them to quite cheaply get producing good software with Visual Studio. So that's a new addition. And we have Test Professional, which is specifically designed for testers in mind. That gives you MTM, which is a specialist functional testing program, which is possibly a subject of a future webinar. So you can learn more about that in future. Moving more on to the more kind of corporate versions of the software that corporations might be interested in. You have professionals. That's a sort of an entry level for corporations. Then moving up, you have premium, where you can have other more advanced features, including CodedUI and other interesting features to do on the development side to help your developers. And then you have Ultimate, which is the highest of all, and that includes all the features of premium and professional, but also you have web and load as well to help you to look at your websites to make sure they can handle the user community that you hope. You need an MSDN license for premium and ultimate. It's optional for professional, but the MSDN license does give other benefits, such as being able to download other software to help you with your development. So there's quite a few options of actually getting Visual Studio and starting work with it, from quite cheap to the relatively expensive over on the Ultimate side. But still, it gives you a very advanced full set of tools for the whole life cycle. As you can see here, for what we're talking about, you need premium and ultimate. So looking at TSS now to see what it can actually do for you. At the base level, you've got your Team Foundation server, which is a database, and that contains all the information that is gathered throughout the whole project. So there's no need to go around looking for information. It's all stored there for reporting. So you can do all your project management from it. You can put in your requirements and track them through and connect pieces of work to your requirements for tracking. You can do version control, very advanced version control on here. Build automation, for example. And this all helps your end-to-end ALM, so that right from requirements through to testing and release, you can ensure that communications are good and you've got good quality and all your people have got all the tools that they need. You can access all this information in various ways. You can have web access for people who don't necessarily need the full-blown Visual Studio experience, but web access has lately become more important, and so more functionality is being included in the web access, so that's more possibilities for people who don't use it. SharePoint reporting, Team Explorer everywhere, so you can use other tools to get into the Team Foundation server, like Java, for example. You don't have to have Visual Studio. You can connect Team Explorer to other interfaces. And you can also integrate with Project Server if you want to do your project management using the project tool. You can do some work in the cloud to Azure, Microsoft Azure, and it's all underpinned by an SQL Server database. So there's something for the whole project lifecycle. In fact, now with the release manager as well, it really does cater for the whole lifecycle of project management and all the tools that anybody needs for all the jobs within that space. Okay, so now let's dive down and have a look at the actual CodedUI. What CodedUI actually does is it records the tester's interactions on the screen as actually conducts the test. It allows them to break the test up into smaller sections, so it makes the test more manageable, and also if you do customizations later on, it makes that easier. So the idea is that you have one method that it's called, one block of code for a part of the test that has a certain function. We'll be looking through some demonstrations of this, quite a simple demonstration where I'll be cutting up the test into quite fine sections just to give you the idea of how that works. And then when you replay the test, it takes control of the mouse and the keyboard and drives the application as it would if you were a user. And then you can build in tests that the system has to look out for as it goes through, and you can build in as many tests as you want so that the system can say whether it passes all the tests or not. And all of this will be covered in demonstrations. So to create a test project, these days you have a test project as well as development projects. You have to create a new kind of project within your solution. It's a good idea to keep your test projects next to your development projects. And then you can select a good name for it and store it how you like within the organisation of your projects. And the system will automatically set up for you the infrastructure that you need. You also have the choice of recording a test completely from scratch, or using what's called an action recording from Microsoft Test Manager to act as a starting point for your testing. And we'll be covering a bit of this later in more detail within another demonstration. Once you've started your test, or once you've created the test project, Visual Studio will minimize, and you'll get this test builder window pop up with 4 basic buttons to allow you to control how the recording progresses. You can start and stop the recording. You can check that your steps are correct. You recorded what you thought you had. There's something there called a crosshair button to allow you to highlight different parts of the interface to bring it into the test so you can test against them. And you can also generate code to split the test up into different sections, or methods as they're known. So here's an example of a UI control being brought into the test by using the crosshair tool. And that just makes the test aware of this control so you can test against it, or maybe even in more advanced scenarios, you can manipulate it and actually drive the test to go through different routes. Once you select a piece of the interface to look at, it will show you its current status via this list. And then if you want to, you can select one of these attributes and then create a test against it. So any of these attributes you can build into a test. So it's very flexible. Now here's an example of saying I want to make sure that the text that appears on the button, for example, is equal to this login. So it's an example of making sure that the right piece of text appears on the interface at a particular point in time within the test. So, time for the first demo, which are in the form of videos, but I will be providing a commentary over the top of the video. Right, so here we have demo number 1. We're in Visual Studio 2012, but the procedure is identical in 2013, so if you use 2013, steps are identical. So I want to start a new CodedUI project, so I'll do that by hitting File and a new project. And here I'm under C#, because you can program in several languages, but we've got F#. And under the test area, I've got CodedUI project. So I can give it a meaningful name here. Always good to name your things so you know how to find them again. I will select Add to the current solution. Okay, so I don't need to create a new solution. I've got one going. So here's where I select if I want to create a recording from scratch or use an action recording. So I'm going to create one from scratch. And Visual Studio minimizes, and we have this test builder, which you can drag to your convenience somewhere on the screen. And this is the interface where you can control the recording. So the first thing I need to do is actually record the application starting up. That's always a good start. And I'm going to use the calculator as an example application, but of course this will be the application which you have under test. So that's all I want to do for the first step. Okay, so I'll just click this button and it will show me what's been recorded. So I can check to make sure that I have the right steps there. Once that's been done, I can turn that one step into a method. So that's just one step within the test. In the real world, you may well decide to have larger methods, have several steps or interactions within single methods. All depends on exactly how you want to modify the test later in time, and that will come with experience. So more experience with the tool will sort of educate you on how to build these tests. So the next piece of recording I'll do, I want to make sure that the calculator has focus. I want to actually put in a number. Okay, so I pressed number 7 on the keypad because it records mouse and keyboard interaction, and it says here that it's recorded correctly one of the numbers being typed into the calculator. So that again will form another individual method. So what will happen is once the system creates the CodedUI, which you'll see in a few minutes, you'll see that there will be a list of method names, which are the names here that we are defining. And you can put code in between those method calls to do things in between the methods. And it's only C# programming, so if you know how to do it in C#, you can get your CodedUI to perform it. Do things like extra output to a file, for example. So we're just creating another method. Now this is the plus method. So I hit the plus button, so that's going to be another method. You can also change the button that the test actually presses, so that if I wanted to, I could get it to press another button at some point in the test, and I could do other kinds of tests like adding and multiplication, for example. By adding in branches in between the method calls, you can get it to, you can guide the test down different paths, get it to try different kinds of routes through the interface, depending on the results of earlier interactions. So it can get very powerful. Okay, so another one to do, we're going to type 1 in the label and make another method out of that. So I hit the equals button, so that gives me the actual result of 7 plus 1, so it's not exactly in advance. We're not exactly putting the calculator to its paces, but this is just to give you an idea. Okay, what we need to do now is something a bit different. We need to actually produce a test. We need to make sure that the correct answer is coming up. So I select the crosshair control, and I drag it along the interface, and you can see it's highlighting different areas of the interface. So once I get to highlight the part of the interface I'm interested in, I'll release it, and I'll get the list of all the attributes of that particular part of the interface. So I can produce a test based on one of these attributes. So display text is the one that we're interested in, obviously. So I can build insertion based on the contents of the text, which is, of course, the results. So I want to make sure that the displayed answer and the answer that I give it as what it should be are equal, although I could have any other kind of operator as well. I could replace that number 8. I'm going to leave it as it is because that's the recorded value, but if I wanted to, I could change it here. And you can also type a message that is put into the results if the interaction fails, if the test fails. So wrong number will appear now in the results if that test fails. So once we've settled that out, we can change that into a test method. I'll leave it as a certain method 1 because it knows it's a certain method, so it gives it an insertion name and generate that code. Now there's only one piece of recording left to do, so I'll just start another piece of recording and close down the application. And just quickly check it, and then I will create my very last method, which is going to be the close application method. And that is the end of the recording. So all I have to do is close down the test builder, and Visual Studio will jump back as a full interface. And you can see here it's done a lot of the coding for us. We're in the part of the code now, which contains the actual calls to the methods that we've written. The test method part of the code actually contains the test that we recorded. So you can see there's the calls to all the methods that we have just recorded. Open that left number, add numbers, right number equals. So we can actually go ahead now and try and run this test to see if it's been successful, if the recording is successful. So we just set it going, and the calculator should come up with no one having to drive it. It does the mathematics, looks at the answer, and you can see here that it's reported that the test has passed. So that's a very simple CodedUI, and that's really the principle of what CodedUI is. Recording the test, letting it run, play it back, put in a few assertions, and that's that video. So if you go back to the slides now. Okay. I seem to be having trouble getting back into my slide deck. Let's see if I can just do this. Bear with me for a second. Nearly. Oh, here we go. Okay, hopefully you can see the slide again. So, pushing right along. Right, we're going to talk a bit now about data-driven tests. You've seen a simple CodedUI test, which is good as far as it goes, but obviously you can only record one test, and then that's all you can do. But in reality, you'd want to have the same kind of test with many inputs and outputs. For example, you might want to do boundary testing to make sure the calculator can deal with large numbers or very small numbers or fractions or negative numbers or many other kinds of inputs and outputs, depending on what the application is. Using data driving allows you to have the same test, but various aspects of the inputs and the outputs, so you can do that kind of boundary testing, boundary idea testing. There's other things you can do with it, but that's the main kind of idea of it. Some quick notes about data-driven tests. If you know about MTM and doing iterations with MTM, they're very similar to that kind of idea. You have a table in a file, and however many rows there are, that's a number of iterations the test will have, and it will take a row of data for each iteration. Okay, quite straightforward. You can select whether you want to do sequential or random on the data as you go through. It's a good idea to do some random as well. You have to do a bit of programming to actually get the data from the data source into the correct parts of the test, and we'll be looking at a demonstration that shows you how to do that. I can't go into detail about the test context now, but all the data that the system needs is stored in the test context. There's a lot of good data in there. You're making changes to the CodedUI CS file, which is the file you saw in the example. And a good tip not to forget, which is quite easy to forget, is that when you import a data file, you should make it a deployment item. Otherwise, things can start to go wrong. So we'll be looking at that as well in the application demonstration. There are quite a few different data sources you can have. Quite simply, you can have a CSV file or XML. I'll be running through an example with CSV. Or you can have database, any kind of standard database you can do this with. And then if you use a database table for your data driving, you can have thousands of rows and really exercise your program. Some usages for data driving, apart from simply iterations, you can use it to drive how actually the system behaves. So you could have, for the example of the calculator, you could say in the data, I want to do an addition test or a subtraction test, and you can drive it that way. So it's not just the numbers, it's actually which buttons are pressed. You can control with data driving. And you can actually become quite complex and do both things, and you can really, depending on how things went earlier in the test, you can do things later. So the data driving can really get quite complex, and there's usually a way to do pretty much anything you can imagine to mimic a user actually using it for real. So let's take a look at the demonstration we have for this next one. Okay, so we'll share desktop. Okay, so here's a demonstration of data driving. We're going to go straight on from the end of the previous demonstration, so we know where we are. So we've just created a very simple calculator interaction. So we need to data drive it. So what we need to do first of all is add the data to the project. We can do this by adding an existing item, and this is going to be a data file, which is just an Excel file saved as a comma-separated value file. So you just have to find where you saved it on your hard drive. There it is, all prepared, and click on it, and it's just included in your project. Now, as I mentioned earlier, as soon as you do that, it's a good idea to change one of its properties. So you can look at the properties window near the bottom of the screen, and you just find where it says copy output, and you say copy always. Okay, it's always a good idea to just change that piece of data. Okay, so you don't have to worry about it or remember it later. So we can take a quick look at the data itself. In the main window, you've got at the top num1, num2 results. So the top line is always taken as the column headings, and then you've got the actual data itself, rows of data. And the computer references those data by the column headings, which you'll see in a second exactly how that works. But it's very easy to change this data now that it's been included in the project. So how do we get that data and use it in the test? Well, we have to do a little bit of programming. So we go into the .cs file, and we find, first of all, we need a line of code which is going to actually reference that data and bring it into the test. Okay, now it just so happens that I've got some standing by, so it makes it nice and easy for me. So I'll just copy and paste that into the test. Without explaining this in too much detail, all of this line is doing is referencing the data file and saying I want to access it in a sequential manner, and it just brings it and makes it available inside the test. And it also takes the place of the test method signal, so I can comment that out. One other piece of work we have to do is to actually get that data now that's in the test and actually plug it into the specific parts of the test that are going to be useful to us. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I'll take this piece of code as well, and just where it says, just before it says left number, I'll say I don't want you to take the recorded value of the left number, I want you to use this instead. So on the right-hand side, it's got num1. Remember, that was one of the headings. So it's telling the computer to take the data from the num1 column, and it puts it into what's called left number params. And these params are things that are set up for you by the system when you create a CodedUI test. Okay. It all takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you understand how it all works, then it starts to make sense, and you start to be more fluent with it. And as you can see, if you hover over some of these elements, then the system will give you quite a lot of help as to what is possible to program at that time. So you're not completely in the dark. It will give you some guidance. For the second number, very similar kind of idea, but in this case we're taking num2 as the data and we're plugging it into writeNum parameter. And we're replacing the hard-coded number with the data from the data file. So we've changed the input parameters. We have to change the output parameter. Okay, so that's what this line of code is going to do. It's very similar. Okay, as you recognize the right-hand side of after the equal sign, as it's taking the result column from the data, but the left-hand side there says assert method expected value. Okay, because it knows it's going into an assertion method, there's now an expected value which is available for you to replace. So you can see that this data is going to now replace the hard-coded values that were put in when the recording took place. So we make sure that it's all saved, then we can rerun the test just by selecting it in the Test Explorer and executing it. And so the calculator should pop up all by itself and run through 3 calculations. You can see it going there. So you can see this can save a lot of time in the future. You can see that the test has actually failed. So we'll take a look at why. So we can see down here that it's expecting 45 as an answer, but it actually got 46 on the calculator. And you can also see there wrong number as the error message that I said should be reported if this particular test failed. Remember, you can have as many tests inside the CodedUI as you want, but this is just to say this is the one that's failed. Well, let's take a look at the data file again, and we can see that, in fact, the last one has been doctored, so it's obviously going to fail. 26 plus 20 is 46, so we'll change that, save it, run the test again, and it should be fine. Of course, in the real world, you wouldn't try and fix the tests by changing the data file. You actually have to report a bug at this stage, and then someone will go back, fix the application, and you then rerun this to check that it had actually been fixed. So now it's gone through, and you can see it's all good, and we've all passed. So that's a simple application of data driving. Now you can be a lot more clever with it. As I say, you can put other programming constructs in there and conditionals so that it presses different buttons and things like that. But that's a straightforward example of data driving. It's a very, very powerful, useful technique. So we'll go back now to the slides, and hopefully we can go back without too much problem. Oh, that's good. Oh, yes, excellent, thank you. So we've done data driving. Now we're going to look at using action recordings. I think we've just got enough time to tackle this subject. So we can, if you use MTM, okay, as a functional testing tool, you can do what's called action recordings. So that's a kind of an easy automation against the test cases within MTM. And what you can do, if you have a good set of those tests, then you can actually use them as a starting point for a CodedUI, which is much more powerful. So they're based on recorded actions from the test cases. They automate your manual tests, so if you've got a good set of manual tests, it saves a lot of time going in. You can preserve iterations. You can do some data driving in MTM, but the data driving in CodedUI is much more powerful, so I strongly suggest that you use that technique. And each step in your test case is converted into a test method within the CodedUI. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind if you do this. So you probably end up with lots and lots of methods, which is no bad thing if you want to actually do a lot of modification. So that's okay. So our last demonstration for today will be how to actually go about doing this. We'll just go and look at this last one. So we're going to do something from scratch now. We're going to actually look at a test case which has been created in MTM and turn it into a CodedUI test to be more effective and more powerful and flexible. So it starts off the same as we saw before with a new project. And again, CodedUI project. Give it a meaningful name, put it in the same solution. I'm going to call it AC for action recording so I can recognize it. This is where the difference comes in. And instead of recording it from scratch, we're going to record it from an existing action recording. Okay, that's the only difference in setup that we go for. Now we see a screen where we can select which test case we actually want to use as a basis. There is only one at the moment, but we could, we're using a query to find them at the moment, but you could easily use just the ID if you knew it, or you can do a search on the title of the test case. So there's a few options in actually finding what you want. On the left-hand side, if there was a stop sign, where you can actually see the test case, then you wouldn't be able to use this test case as for CodedUI, because it meant there has to be a action recording associated with this test case to actually use it, obviously. So it lets you know which ones you can use, and we can use this one. So the system will very quickly create CodedUI tests for us. You can see 3 methods because there were only 3 steps in the test case, which you can look at if you go back to MTM, which displays this particular test case. You can see there are three steps in the test case, and therefore there are 3 methods in the CodedUI. Okay, because it splits it out nicely for us. So now we have a CodedUI, it seems. There's no reason why we can't just go ahead and run it, and we can. So let's see what happens. So it runs through, and up pops the calculator, does something. It looks okay, and it tells us that it passed. But that's a bit misleading because all it's done is it said, I can replay the recording. That's, without any errors on the system. That's all it's saying. In order to actually make it a useful test, as it were, you have to add in a test yourself, and this will allow it to actually do the checking for you. On MTM you have to do the manual checks, but on here you can make the system do it. So you right click and say add some code, and I want to add the code using the test builder. So I'll do that. I'll drag up the CodedUI test builder. I'll start the application under test, and I will use the crosshair tool to select the part of the interface where the test is going to be based. The same as before, the answer window. Release. This is just going over, again, ground we've seen before, but we're going to check to say that we want to check that the display text is fine, is what we expect it to be. Add an assertion on that. This time, we don't have a recorded value, so we've got to put the value in ourselves. Or we could do it via data driving, of course. But we're going to put wrong number in again as an error message. Always a good idea to do that. And we'll turn that into a method within the CodedUI test. Okay, and we could put in a method description, which would be then added as a comment in the code, just as a bit of documentation within the code. So then we'll close everything down, and you can see we have an assert method now. Okay, in the correct place. Between after actually putting in the numbers, we can assert that the answer is the correct answer. So we can run the test again to see that that's not introduced any errors in the test. Always good to make sure that your tests are running properly before you start to use them properly within your ALM. And we can see that it has passed, and this time it means something. It means that it actually has generated the correct answer. for 7+1. Another simple example. I'll just quickly show you a little trick, actually, to do here. I think it's useful. It's possible to have quite a lot of tests living inside your test explorer, and the system gives them quite bland names like CodedUI test method, whatever, 1, 2, 3. Not very easy for you to recognize your particular test. So it's quite a simple matter just to replace this particular name on the test method. Okay, you can change that name to something of your choosing, something which makes sense to you to recognize this particular test. And once you do that, every time that you run this test in future, the results will report the outcome under this name which you've just put in. So just make sure I'm not breaking anything by changing the name of a method. So yeah, test case IC. If I run it again, it should report its results under that name. And you can see on the left-hand side, test project AC. And then when it comes back as a result, we can open it up and it says that's the name of the test as well. So that's a good thing to do when you're using CodedUI. There's one more thing you can do in CodedUI, and that is to associate this test back to the test case that it was based on. And that's useful for a couple of reasons. It's useful to do it because it's good to see in documentation from NTM that it's been done, and that could be useful. But it's also, in the long run, if you use test environments, then it's possible to run a CodedUI from NTM using this linkage. Okay, but you need to set up a test environment, which is something well beyond the scope of this discussion. But just to let you know that it is possible. The linkage has to be performed from Visual Studio. So you find Visual Studio, you find the test case as a work item, go to associated automation, and you can then associate test case to any CodedUI test within the project. Okay, so there it is. You just save the work item, and it's got that linkage now. Another example of good linkages between work items and elements within Team Foundation Server. So if we now go back to NTM and refresh the work item to make sure everything's up to date, look at the associated automation, and there you can see we have an associated CodedUI against this work item, this test case. And as I say, if you invest some time in creating some test environments, then you can launch your CodedUIs through NTM. Okay, so that concludes the last demonstration for today. So if you can go back to the slides. Okay, thanks. So just a quick word about how Testhouse can help different organisations. We do several different kinds of work. We have deployments, so we can help you to set up your Team Foundation Server and your Visual Studio. We can help you install it, customize it, integrate it with other software packages that you may have, or suggest ones that you might like to use. We also do consultancy. There's something called DTDPS, that's Developer Tools Deployment Planning Services, for its long name. And how that works basically is that you buy licenses from Microsoft for things like Visual Studio, and under certain conditions, you can earn free consultancy days. You can trade in those points for free consultancy days to have gold partners like us come in and help you to use the tools to best advantage. If you're not sure whether you have these points to have these 3 days, then you can contact us and we can help you. We can find out whether you're entitled or not. But it's well worth doing because we can help you not only with the technical tools but also with your whole lifecycle approach and your quality assurance strategies. We also offer quite a lot of training, which we can do on your site or on one of our sites. or maybe an online solution over the internet, something a bit like this but more interactive. And we offer courses in many different areas, like CodedUI, for example. There's a lot about CodedUI which we haven't had time to show. We haven't really explored much of its power and usefulness, but a good course will show you exactly what it's capable of. We also do courses in Test Manager, Web and Load, for your to make sure that your systems are fast enough. Team Foundation Server and automated testing in general, and also how to do Scrum and Agile and how to fit quality assurance into those methodologies. So quite a few things that we could help you with. We're also on the internet, social media, so you can see our some YouTube videos. We also have Twitter feed, Pinpoint as well, and you can find us on LinkedIn. So there's plenty of places for you to find us out online. So that's the end of my presentation for today. So I'm going to hand you back to Mel, who will host some Q&A.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's quite a good, excellent presentation on CodedUI. As my colleague Peter mentioned, we are taking questions. So if you can type in any questions that you have in today's presentation, please do type them in on your Q&A pod. I can see earlier that we've had a few questions already on our Q&A pod, so we'll start with the questions. Okay. First question, can you compare results with regular expressions?
Well, there is regular expression support within Visual Studio. It's very extensible, the Visual Studio environment. So if you can do something in C#, then you can pretty much do it within your environment. And I know C# has support for regular expressions. So simple answer is yes, I'm sure that could be done. It's not something I've had to do myself, but I'm pretty sure that would be possible.
Next question. Is there anything new to CodedUI in Visual Studio 2013 compared to VS2012?
No, not really. The CodedUI side of things has been quite stable over those releases. I think most of the differences are there's some sort of bells and whistles on the developer side. Okay, there's some things like things to help your developers migrate through the code that they've written, to see linkages through the code that they've written. There's also some other quality assurance benefits as well in the latest releases. But as far as CodedUI is concerned, it's pretty much the same between those releases.
Okay. Next question. Can CodedUI work with Adobe Flex and Microsoft Excel?
Whenever you think about using CodedUI against any technology, it's highly recommended that you do some kind of proof of concept to make sure that whatever you're testing against is supported by CodedUI, because the truth is not all technologies can be used with CodedUI, because there's some technology in the background that are built into Microsoft interfaces, which the CodedUI locks into and hooks into to drive the interface and to find out what's going on in the interface. So as long as it's a Microsoft-based technology like .NET or something like that, there shouldn't be a problem. If you're thinking of coming away from Microsoft, or even more so if you write your own custom controls, then it's very much recommended that you do a project to make sure that those technologies are fully supported by CodedUI.
What technologies will CodedUI work with?
Well, as I just mentioned, pretty much anything Microsoft-based, you shouldn't have a problem with. as soon as you come away from Microsoft, then it's a question of try it and see.
Okay, next question. I think this was initially done at the beginning of the presentation. Could you use the professional edition with today's seminar or with CodedUI?
No, as you need Ultimate to run this. As a previous slide, professional is not a high enough grade to use CodedUI with, I'm afraid.
Okay, we'll take a few more. Can CodedUI tests be started automatically?
Yes, there's. You can start it via the command. There's a command line that allows you access to the CodedUI, so you can actually start it via the command line, and of course that leaves the possibility of writing a batch file, which can be executed via some kind of cron job, which will allow you to run one of these things overnight. So yes, you can automatically start CodedUI. And going one step beyond that is that if you do a certain build, you can create a build so that if you do an overnight build, for example, then you can deploy that build onto a virtual environment, let's say, and then you can automatically execute a CodedUI test on top of that, and then in the morning you can see whether the build has been successful or not.
Can we create automated CodedUI script from an exploratory test created in MTM?
I think yes. I think the answer to that is yes. I'm familiar with exploratory testing, and I know that at the end of exploratory testing you can get the system to automatically generate a test case for you, which obviously needs to be refined somewhat because it's automatically been generated. But once you have any test case in the system, that test case can be used as a basis for your CodedUI. The recording is there because the recording has been made automatically for you in the background. So yes, I think that would work.
Okay. Is it possible to have more than one data driving file in the same test?
No, I think you can have only one file in any single CodedUI test. It is possible though to have quite as many columns as you like, so you can use different columns to do different jobs within the CodedUI. So I think you'll always find a way to get by with just the one data file. I think at the moment you can only have one data file at a time.
Okay, we'll take a couple more. How can you automate the running of CodedUI tests, i.e. run a test suite during the night?
Oh, well, I think I sort of kind of covered this in a previous answer. You can run it off a command line, so you can have a batch job with a timer to run the job any time over the night you like. It issues the command and your CodedUI can start. Or you can have an overnight build and attach your CodedUI to that. So there's a few possibilities for starting your CodedUI without having to actually do it manually.
We'll take the last question for this evening or this afternoon. Can you add parameters to a CodedUI test, i.e. the URL of a website?
Yes, you can do that because it's a CodedUI and it's under program control. What I think you would have to do is you would have to do a little bit of programming in C# or whatever language you choose, a bit of string manipulation, okay, to split up the string, which is your URL, for example, and then maybe data driving or using some other technique. You would have the different elements of your URL. Then you would combine those elements to create the string, which is your URL, and then you would feed that into the test using maybe a technique which I showed you in the demonstration. And And so using those kind of programming techniques, you can be very, very flexible, and you can change the data which your test is actually using. So if you can program it, you can do it.
Thank you. That concludes our Q&A session. I know we have a few more questions that Peter needs to answer. We will take them offline. I will ask Peter to individually answer your questions this evening. The recording, just before we go, the recording will be available within the next couple of days. I know a couple of you guys have asked when the recording will be available. It will be in a couple of days, so please hang on to that. Before we go, as I mentioned, if you have any further questions you would like to ask Peter, please do email him. His contact details are on the slide now. Peter mentioned DTDPS. If you want to know more about DTDPS or find out how many DTDPS days or free consulting days of a Microsoft entitlement your company has, please feel free to contact me. So thank you, Peter, for a valuable presentation today. Hope to all see you again at our next session, which is next Thursday, same time, December 11th. So our topic for the next session is on web performance testing, again using Visual Studio 2013. So thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. Have a great day.